And so today we're going to be talking about the idea of, we're going to talk about bald people, but first we're going to talk about bullseyes. So in case you're not sure what a bullseye is, here's a definition that I found on the website. To bullseye, and this is kind of the phrase of it, is to hit the bullseye. Literally means to hit the center of a target. It means to do something just right, to get the best result possible, to be exactly right, is to hit the bullseye. And so now, with that knowledge, when you think about bald people, what would be the bullseye? Like if you were to think of a person, who would be like the center of they encapsulate everything of what it means to be a bald person? Steve Harvey? There you go. Yeah, my wife got it. She cheated. Mr. Clean. I'm sure there's other good examples, but I mean, he's nailing it. Just like absolutely hair free. I'm working towards it. We'll see. So patriotic. If you think of the image of what this is the person that encapsulates America. What? Beyonce, possibility. I went with a little bit more local. Troy's own Uncle Sam. That's it. That's or actually I think the better picture of it is Apollo Creed and his perception of what Uncle Sam was going to be. And you could go through all kinds of different categories of who kind of exemplifies the absolute center. They are nailing it. But what I want to talk about is Christian. When you think about who is somebody that just exemplifies what it looks like to be a Christian. When you think of someone who just to hit the bullseye, it literally means they are hitting the center of the target, doing it exactly right. If someone was our hand prayer, if someone was to completely surrender their preferences, hold their hands out open, hold their hands out in mission, what does that person look like? And so obviously Jesus is the right answer, but there's other answers. And so besides Jesus, who's someone that maybe you've known in life, or maybe someone that you can think of in history who just exemplifies what it looks like to be a Christian? Give me a couple answers. St. Francis, good. Mother Teresa. Susan Sawyer. Shane Claiborne. Jimmy? Oh, dear. And you know me pretty well, too. We got to hang out more, Jimmy. The president? Bonhoeffer? Very good. All right, we're going to come back to that. Today, we are continuing going through the gospel according to Luke. And we've been going through this since December. I was doing some math on this. We're going to actually be going through it for probably the next 2 years because we've arrived at chapter 6 and we're in June and it's 24 chapters long. And so off of current math, we're going to be in this for a long time. But I love it. And so a lot of people will talk about the idea of what is the gospel? Tell me the gospel. Well, this is the gospel according to Luke. All 24 chapters tell the gospel that Luke is trying to tell us of the story of Jesus. And we're in the middle of chapter 6 right now. And for the next 5 weeks, we're going to be looking at a sermon that Jesus did. And this is a very kind of famous sermon that Jesus did. And I think it's incredibly, incredibly important. It's talked about in 2 of the different gospel accounts. And so we have 4 different main gospel accounts. We're looking at the gospel according to Luke. And so it talks about this sermon in the gospel according to Luke. It also talks about it in the gospel according to Matthew. And if you take your time, you can read through both accounts. It won't take you super long. But you'll find that they are a little bit different. And so Matthew includes some things that Luke doesn't include. Luke phrases some things different in his version of the sermon than Matthew does. And maybe kind of most obvious, when you look at the sermon, this is how Luke says it. He says, Jesus went down with them and stood on a level place. In Matthew, in his sermon, he says that Jesus went up to a mount. And so Matthew's is often called the Sermon on the Mount, and this is often called the Sermon on the Plain. And what most people think is going on here is that this was a sermon that Jesus didn't do just once. This is a sermon that Jesus did multiple times, over and over and over again. And actually, what a lot of people think is that this was Jesus's, this kind of was his sermon. That as he went around for 3 years, this was like his stump speech. This was like the thing he went back to over and over again in kind of all these different places. And so they recorded it at different places, but Luke is telling us at least one instance of when Jesus recorded this sermon. And the reason why Jesus said this sermon so often is I think that this sermon does as good of a job as anything of letting us know what the bullseye is. Jesus in this sermon is describing, here's what it looks like to become a follower of me. Here's what it looks like to become a Christian. If you want to make me king of your life, if you want to be a part of my movement, this sermon kind of encapsulates what the whole thing looks like. And so we're going to go through it pretty slowly, and we're going to look at it for all 5 weeks and kind of break down every part that as Luke describes this sermon. And one of the things is a bunch of things, but one of the things that I want us to see as we go through this sermon is that this sermon, as well as everything else we've looked at in Luke so far, does such a good job of just showing just the countercultural, the paradoxical, different way that Jesus is calling us to live. That the values that Jesus is telling us to live by, what Jesus is calling us to prioritize, this way of living in the Jesus is just so revolutionary different. And at some level, it's so different that it raises a tension then against any other way of living. And so we've talked about it's different than it puts tension against my values and my preferences and my prejudices. Like the Jesus way just like moves me to be different than how I would maybe naturally do. It's definitely way different and in tension than the American way. The American dream and the Jesus dream tend to be very different and often are at odds. It's different than the Republican dream and Republican values. And it's different than the Democratic values. And we talked about this a few weeks ago. To try to cram the Jesus, I'm going to keep my way, and I'm just trying to add Jesus in and try to kind of cram Jesus into my own thing is going to end up blowing up our own. It doesn't work. What Jesus wants to do is create something brand new and have this whole new paradigm of how we're going to live. And as we go through it today, at the beginning of the sermon, Jesus is just so clear about this just very different ethic, this very different priority of how his kingdom works as opposed to how my kingdom, your kingdom, all the other kingdoms of the world work. And he claims that his way is better. And he invites us to choose his way over all those other ways. So here's how Luke begins his version of it, is Luke starts by not just telling us what Jesus said, but Luke took the time to let us know who he was saying it to. So he wants to paint a picture of what this looks like. And so I'm going to read this, and then I want a little bit of crowd response. And so Jesus is going to describe for us what this crowd in front of him looks like. Who are the people that are listening to this sermon? And just give me a little bit of feedback in a second on what you picture when you picture this crowd. What does this crowd look like? What do they smell like? What kind of a grouping is this? I see what it says. As he, meaning Jesus, went down with them and stood on a level place, and a large crowd of his disciples was there, and a great number of people from all over Judea, from Jerusalem and from the coastal region around Tyre and Sidon, who had come to hear him and to be healed of their diseases. Those troubled by impure spirits were cured, and the people all tried to touch him because power was coming from him and healing them all. Looking at his disciples, he said. So what do you think? What do you think this crowd looked like? What are the things you kind of glean from that? Sure. Dirty traveling. Okay, I like that. Yeah, what else? Yeah, that's good. Good. What else? Sure. Show of hands, who's been in a mosh pit before? Nice. Well, what else do you picture when you picture this crowd of people? Yeah? Yeah. Yeah, totally. Yeah. Man, I love the idea of, like, diseases. I mean, you ever like walk through like a sick ward of a hospital and just everyone's just like, man, this is like a group of people that, I mean, they're diseased. They are sick. Yeah, Sarah. Yeah. Totally. Mosh pity. Yeah. Uh, and then I don't know, Brandon, one more. Yeah. Totally. I love it. Uh, and then no one hit on it yet. Maybe someone's thinking it, but the demon possessed idea. Well, what is a one, two, if there's like a good amount of people there that we don't know even know like exactly what's going on with them, but if other people are like that woman is demon possessed, like what does that kind of a person look like? And this is kind of like a little bit of like a gnarly group that is around Jesus. And so I think that's important that Luke wants us to know just not what Jesus is going to say, but what this group of people looks like. And now Jesus continues. Oh, one more, Joel. I like it. Yeah. Cool, right? I love it. All right, I got to go on. And now looking at this disciples, this is what Jesus said, is blessed are you who? Spend a little bit of time on that word, blessed. What does Jesus mean by blessed? When he's looking at this group of people and he's proclaiming on them, this is a group of people that are blessed. What does this mean? There's a great... I know that I want to like do a ton of conversation, but I got like a ton to cover. But thank you. Thank you for raising your hand. And I want to hear it. You have, I don't know. I'm all screwed up today. Great tool I want to point you guys to today. If you're a podcast listener, if you have like a half an hour later on this week, our friends at the Bible Project did a whole series and like a whole year last year just through the Sermon on the Mount, through Matthew's version of it. And so they have a podcast where they talk just about this word blessed. So it's 34 minutes. And so if you're into like just like the original language and the Aramaic and the Hebrew and the Greek of it all, it's just really fantastic. And so if you have a half an hour this week, it's episode 396, and so check that out. But where they point to in that podcast, and lots of other scholars have this idea, is that maybe a better, because we just don't use blessed all that much in our world, it maybe doesn't like strike as much of a nerve. And so some potentially better words is when Jesus is saying, blessed are you are, maybe a better word is this idea of flourishing. That like, this is what a flourishing person looks like. And maybe some of us have an image of that. Or maybe a better one is the good life. Here's what the good life looks like. If you were like going to picture someone that was like living the good life, what does that person look like? Or another one is just ours today, the bullseye. Like if you had to think of someone who's just like, man, they are just on it. They are living it. What does that look like? Or the one that I kind of like the best is enviable. Like if you were to think of someone who's like their life, like the way in which they are doing, it's like, I wish I had that. And so a little bit of a picture for that. Some of you may or may not know, one of my favorite things to do is during the summer, I like to go up to the Adirondacks, and we have a 17-foot canoe, and I love to canoe around all these kind of lakes in the Adirondacks. And a regular thing that I will think as I am rowing around is we'll be rowing and we'll go past these different like Adirondack cabins. And they're beautiful and these wood cabins and they have a fire out there and the Adirondack chairs and a dock and a boat. And I'm going across to my little canoe and I'm like, man, like, could you imagine what it would be like to have that house? Like, I mean, whoever like lives in that house, they're living the good life. Like they're flourishing. Like they are absolutely killing it. And so, what are the people that are like enviable? Well, what really, by Jesus' definition, like that's by the Jonathanianity definition, that's the person who's killing it. We know like by the American version, like here's the person who's like has the enviable life. But for Jesus, for the Bible, for God's whole picture, what does it look like to have the enviable, flourishing, blessed life? Such a big deal, and like the whole story of the Bible. 2 years ago, some of you were here, we did a whole series where we went through, look at me 2 years ago, so much younger. 2 years ago, we spent a whole semester going through just Genesis 1, 2, and 3, the first 3 chapters of the Bible. And we kind of tried to paint this picture that, especially in Genesis 1 and in Genesis 2, we see the bullseye. We see the enviable life. This was God's, what we said, was God's original plan for how the world was always supposed to be. This is how humans were supposed to live. This is how the world was supposed to be. It got messed up because of sin, and now God is trying to get us back to that. And so what is that? What does that look like to like if we were to live in God's original plan? If we were to live in the bullseye, if we were to live in the blessed, flourishing, enviable life that God has always wanted us to live with, who are those people? I mean, if you're like, it's like walk around the streets of Albany and like point out like that person's in it. They're living the blessed, enviable life. Well, what kind of characteristics does that person have? And Jesus is going to tell us his version of the kind of people that are living in the blessed, flourishing, the kind of lives that we should all look like and kind of have like a righteous enviableness. Like, man, I wish I had what they have. Here's what Jesus says. He looks at his disciples and he said, blessed are you who are poor, for yours is the kingdom of God. Blessed are you who have clickers that work. There he is. Blessed are you who hunger now, for you will be satisfied. Blessed are you who weep now, for you will laugh. Blessed are you when people hate you, when they exclude you and insult you and reject your name as evil because of the Son of Man. According to Jesus. If you want to know who the blessed people are, if you want to know who the flourishing people are, if you want to know these are the people that are really living the good life. This is the people that are living in the bullseye. Here's where you look. Look to the people that are poor, hungry, weeping, hated, excluded, insulted, and rejected. Anybody want to sign up? Does anyone think like that's the kind of life I want? Like if I could just if people could hate me more. If I could just be hungry, that's the kind of life I am looking for. What do you think for the people that are there? As they're like, they're diseased, they're oppressed by the Roman Empire. What kind of reaction do you think they had when they're like, hey, you right now, you're poor, you are blessed. I don't feel blessed. I feel like my life's hard. I don't feel like, no one should be envying my life. There's other people that I envy their life. But in Jesus' kingdom, somehow he is like so flipping the scales of what a blessed, enviable, good life looks like. And in case that wasn't quite clear, then Jesus goes on. And now he says, woe. This will be a slightly easier definition. Woe is defined as this. Woe! It's like, be careful. Caution. Woe is the opposite of bullseye. And so if you ever play darts, especially if you ever go to like a place where there's darts, and if you go with me, I am not very good at darts. And so I very rarely hit the bullseye. And I have been known multiple times when I'm playing darts. If you ever look at a dartboard and you see like the dartboard and you see the sheetrock around it, and there's like holes in the sheetrock because they didn't even hit the target. They just, they hit the wall. That has often been me. And so, if you see me playing darts, very often as they see me start to throw, there's kind of this like, whoa! Like, this guy is not going to the right place. You are veering off. You are not going to hit the bullseye. So, who are the people that you should, they're obviously going in the right direction. Who are the people that you would say, whoa, you are not going in the right place? Jesus says, but woe to you who are rich, for you have already received your comfort. Woe to you who are well fed now, for you will go hungry. Woe to you who laugh now, for you will mourn and weep. Woe to you when everyone speaks well of you. Who are the people for Jesus that he thinks are potentially going in the wrong direction? That they are not on a trajectory to hit the bullseye, to not have the enviable life, to not have the flourishing life. According to Jesus, it's the rich, it's the well-fed, it's those that are laughing, and everyone who speaks well of you. I need to do better. So, when you look at these two lists, which side would you rather be on? If it was up to you to define what is the flourishing way to live, based off of Jonathan-ianity, I know exactly what I think is the best way, the flourishing way to live. Based off of the American dream, I know what is the best way to live. Based off of the Republican agenda, based off of the Democratic agenda, I have an idea of which way should go. But what Jesus is stating is something different. Or for that matter, he's listed some bullseyes before. Mother Teresa. Which side was she on? Martin Luther King. Bonhoeffer. St. Francis. When you think of some of the people throughout church history, they're like, man, that person really personifies what it looks like to follow Jesus. Are they rich or are they poor? Are they hungry or are they well-fed? Do they know what it's like to weep and cry, or are they just like having the time of their life all the time? Do people sometimes hate them, exclude them, insult them, reject them? Or is everyone just speaking well of them? And then what does that mean for us? Joel Green, who is a commentator on the book of Luke, talks about this like paradigm that Jesus is talking about in the Sermon on the Mount all throughout Luke. And I love what he says. He says, Jesus is calling for a paradigm shift of colossal proportions. Moreover, the new world and the values it embodies will catch unawares those who measure their lives by the old order. Their sense of well-being and self-assurance is grounded in false values. As we go through this, I think Jesus wants to create this tension of what we've always thought was our goal, what is our prayer, of where we are going for. Jesus wants to do something radically, radically different. So two things. So first, for those of us maybe who feel already like we are on the poor side, we already are feeling like life situation right now is hard. And because of, we feel like we don't have enough money to buy groceries right now, because of some turmoil going on, we feel this hate and tension against us. Things are tough at work. Things are tough in our family. We don't feel like that we have the ability to laugh right now. Just the world feels heavy and weeping. And we don't feel like that we are living the flourishing, enviable life. It's not like, okay, so Are you saying just because I'm poor and things are hard, I'm just automatically living it? Like, what does this have to say to us? And for that, I want to read a little bit. This is from another Bible Project podcast. Again, there's so much good stuff that they did over the Sermon on the Mount. And this is a Q&A episode. And so this reading's a little bit clunky because it's from a podcast. But I think this is a great job of answering it too. So if you're in that situation, what is this text saying to you? And so first they got a question. Sorry, I'm skipping past a bunch here. So why does this verse and the Sermon on the Mount as a whole matter to people who feel and think? Did I skip one? Yeah, here we go. Okay. So I recently, this is someone who had asking a question. I recently had a long conversation with a very close friend of mine who told me that he's feeling overworked, crushed, oppressed, complacent, powerless, and hopeless by the powers in the current system of the world. Maybe some of you can relate. And because of all that stuff going on in the world, they feel like it's impossible to experience the good life. And again, maybe that's how some of us feel. That like because of the current circumstances of my life, whatever this good life is that God is promising, it's just beyond me. And I feel like I would need to have more money. I would need to have a better job. I would need to have some type of better situation for me to experience it. But in my current situation, it's just impossible. Why does this verse and the Sermon on the Mount as a whole matter to people who feel and think this way? Come on. I think your friend is actually experiencing the shock that Jesus intended people to feel and hear when he uttered these good life sayings. On their standpoint, part of Jesus' goal here was to get people to be like, what? Like, they have the good life, and so there's the rich people here, they don't have the good life. There's like a shockedness to that, and that's part of what Jesus is going for. This is the natural and intended reaction that Jesus wanted people to have. People whose lives are terrible. And they're like, what do you mean that I'm the recipient of the good life? And I don't think what Jesus is not saying is your current conditions of being powerless and grieving, he's not saying that's good. And so I don't think what Jesus is saying here is like, oh, you're starving to death? That's awesome. Oh, everyone like hates you and is beating you up? Let's get more of that. I don't think that's what Jesus is saying. What he's saying is something is happening in this moment. So we have to first locate ourselves in the actual story where Jesus is saying these things, and to whom he's saying them is to people who are experiencing life like your friend Colin. And so what makes their situation all of a sudden the good life is because Jesus was standing right there, offering them and inviting them into communities where they would begin to experience the reality of God's kingdom that will transform their life experience. It most likely will not change their circumstances. Jesus is saying in that sense, your life circumstances, no matter what you're in, can be said to be called the good life. And so Colin said it feels impossible to experience the good life when you're overworked, crushed, oppressed, complacent, powerless, and hopeless. And in one sense, that's true. But in another sense, what if it's not impossible? What if it's not something that you can do by yourself? It's something you can experience in a community of people who are learning to live by the ethic of a different kingdom. I think that's what it would take to convince a friend like that. The good life actually can be experienced even when you are feeling all of those things. And so this week, one of the tensions that I want us to wrestle with is if at any place in your life you are feeling a little bit of these things, I want you to know that it is possible to totally experience the life of Jesus in that moment. And that's very difficult, and that's very countercultural, and that doesn't often make sense in our logical minds of how we see the world, but it's the promise that Jesus is giving. Small example of that, and in general, my life is very cush and very privileged. I get it. But I was thinking about this morning because this is what we're going to be preaching on. And so came in this morning, and this morning we had some just technical bugs. We are in the process right now of moving buildings, and so like half of our equipment is at one building, half is another, and just stuff was not working the way it was supposed to. The keyboard wasn't working for Lenore, a computer wasn't working right, and so Ferran's working on a different computer than we were supposed to. We don't have our TVs because our TVs are over at the other building, and so we set up this projector, and I realized I forgot the power cord for the projector in the trailer, which is at the other building. So I had to drive over there, and like in my little body, I'm just like, rah, 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 like, well, why isn't this stuff working right? And I'm just like so stressed and tense, and like driving over there. And as I was like driving, just this voice of the Holy Spirit, and like thinking, I was like, can you live the good life in this moment of stress? Right when things are not going the way, is everything that God promises actually available to you or not? I mean, come on, John, do you believe this stuff or not? And I just believe that in that moment, the full weight of God's love and grace was totally available, and the computer still didn't work, and we still have the wrong keyboard, and I'm able to experience the good life. And I want you to wrestle with that and to believe that. Second thing, I think this one's harder. For those of us who are on the other side, and I think this is most of us because we live in America and because of all the different privilege that we have in the world. Most of us, globally speaking, are pretty rich. Most of us are well-fed, especially because of Carmen and Sue giving us all those baked goods back there today. Most of us, you just laughed. We have things that we're enjoying in life. And I hope people are speaking well of you. For us, I think we need to be very careful about what we are placing as our hope for the good life. And if our hope is somehow based in our money and our possessions, if it's based in our reputation, and if I can get these people at work to like me, and if I get this good review, and if somehow I can just like feel good and be happy, and if I need everything in my life to be working well for me to experience the good life, and if I feel like I'm never going to quite really have what I need, and I can't really be happy, and I can't really be blessed until I have enough money, and until my house is in the right order, and until my job situation gets figured out, and until my health situation, if somehow there's a part of me that needs all of that to be right before I can totally be blessed, woe to you, because you're not going to hit it. If you're waiting until life is the way the American way, the me way, the Republican, the Democrat way tells you it's supposed to be, you're going to be waiting forever. You're going to be chasing it. It's a treadmill. It's a trap. It's not going to work. And so Jesus is inviting you to instead to find the blessed, enviable life in something different than your money, than in having all your needs met, and having everything be happy, and everybody else around you liking you. And that's something to wrestle with. That's something to think about. And in the end, there's a way that Jesus has for us to hit a bullseye that is so much better than any of those. But it begins, and I think in a lot of ways it ends, with this invitation that Jesus has to choose his way over any other ways. So as we transition into a time of communion, that's where I want to leave us for just the beginning of the sermon, is that this is what Jesus is inviting you to, is into this totally different paradigm, and to drop your other ways of how you think life should operate, and instead choose, accept the invitation to his new, countercultural, very different, but very better way. So I'm going to say a prayer, and then we're going to sing a song that I think, again, I hope it keeps the tension moving in us of like what God is calling us to do and change and live for his way. So let me pray, and then you can join us in singing. Jesus, I know it's just so much easier to talk about this stuff than it is actually to live. And it's so easy to let the circumstances of life convince me that just my life is terrible, and I to feel like somehow you're far away and that you don't love me, because if you did, then you'd be making life work better than what it is. But that's not what you promise. You promise that in the midst of really sometimes hard, difficult circumstances, that is where you meet us. And that is where you have called us to. And then I think at a different level, you are calling us away from all these other kingdom ideals. And instead of just pursuing more money and more comfort and more enjoyment and more likes and more followers and better reputation, you're calling us to go for something much different. You're calling us to follow in your way, and in the way of Mother Teresa, and in the way of Bonhoeffer, and in the way of so many people that have actually embraced a life of self-sacrifice that they were swearing was the better way to live. And help us to wrestle with all the implications of what that might mean for our real lives today. Help us to choose your way, and however your Spirit is calling us to change and revolutionize our lives. So we pray. Amen. Let's stand up. Let's sing this song.